Who the Wild Things Are with Ryan McGuire.
You gotta listen to your body.
Oh my God, maybe, I could get out there, I could do this.
Let's take a ride, find your wild side, real stories, see with your own eyes.
It's so beautiful.
I'm gonna have the best time out here.
I was in tears. I was just like, that's the best, man.
Welcome back to Who the Wild Things Are. My name is Ryan McGuire, and I'm here to bring you conversations with the most wild folks on the planet. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you enjoyed the episode, share it with a friend. Appreciate you guys. Let's get it going. Cool. Well, Kris, thanks for coming on. I know we've been talking about, getting you on here for a while. You're a guy that I feel like has a lot of interesting stories that are different from most of the media maybe that's out in the world, doing a lot of crazy shit. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, excited to be here.
So I guess just like as a bit of a background introduction to Kris Reed, give people like just, a little synopsis of kind of the skills you've taught over the years, big adventures. Who is Kris Reed?
Well, so I took a Boulder Outdoor Survival School course when I was 17. And after starving for 18 days and losing 55 pounds, I was like, I can go live in the woods. And so I ended up going to Montana and doing a year at the Hollow Top Outdoor Primitive School, learning buckskin and basketry and mostly edible plants. And then just started doing my own stuff and teaching after that. So, and then when I was 21, I tried my first through hike.
Okay.
So it was my first solo hike that I walked any distance. And then I've just started racking up miles since there. I think I'm over 15,000 right now.
Wow. That's legit. And fresh off the Arizona Trail.
Yep.
That's exciting. So I guess for people that don't know, Boulder Outdoor Survival School is a very old survival program in Boulder, Utah. What does that kind of education or course look like? Like, what if you were talking to a listener at home, how would you paint that picture for them?
Well, so the school did start in the 60s, and it's like maybe the only survival school that has a lot of grandfathered in rules.
Yeah.
So you can do a lot more there than you can in other schools. And I went there as I was 17 and no camping experience. And the first 4 days, they give you a cup. It's different now, but when I was there, they give you a cup and a knife and you just wander through the desert. You don't get maps or anything at that point. You're just kind of following these people and you don't eat and they don't tell you how to make a shelter. And you just like sleep on the cold ground, and they pretty much just strip you to the bare minimum to make you suffer as much as possible, so that when they reintroduce stuff, it seems like luxuries.
Yeah.
So after 4 days, you get a blanket and a poncho and a little bit of food, and yeah, I felt like I was living large.
Yeah, that's a good feeling.
But yeah, I mean, I think it was my third day out. So the first 4 days is called Impact, and my first camping trip, there's a big thunderstorm and it's pouring rain and we don't have any rain gear. So we are supposed to spread out. So if one of us gets struck, not all of us do.
Right. Like lightning safety precautions.
Yeah. And I took my sun shirt and I had it like hunched over my stuff and I was trying to filter it into my, my cup so I could drink fresh water that wasn't brown. And, I was pretty excited about that. I drank a few cups and then I was like, man, the storm kind of stopped and they haven't given the hoot to all meet up. And so I was like, just kind of waiting there. Eventually started looking around and everybody had taken off without me.
Oh, no.
And I had no clue what to do. And I was like doing the hoot, screaming out, trying to see if somebody would come find me and just nothing. And for some reason, I didn't know about tracks. So I didn't think to follow the tracks. I just climbed a hill and was like, that looks like a good direction to walk, and I started walking that way, and it just happened to be the way they went. So
and you found them.
I walked into camp and they were like, hey, you were supposed to be ready for our talk by now. And I was like, oh, okay. And nobody knew.
Nobody knew that you had been missing.
know.
That's crazy.
But yeah, after that, it's just like a series of, you walk for 2 or 3 days, and then you have a day or two off to practice some skill, like a tracking skill or a friction fire, making a bow drill kit, or learning to make a trap, something like that. And then they do something in the middle where you kill a sheep and you get like a bunch of food for the first time, and then do a solo. And for me, I think I had starved so much being 17 that when I had that base camp with the sheep meat and a ton of fry bread, I got super sick. And on my solo, I was like delirious, and I started having diarrhea and then fainting.
Whoa.
And waking up in puddles of diarrhea.
Oh no.
And I was like, I cannot handle this. Definitely at 17, I hadn't even done laundry for the first time in my life. So I was like, oh God. And when the instructors checked in on me, because I couldn't find the rocks I was supposed to do to let people know I was okay, they were like, yeah, you can stay in our base camp for a few days to recover and then keep at it. And I was like, I'm not telling these people all my clothing is covered in shit. So I was like, I gotta go home. I'm throwing these things away. But that's how my trip went.
Wow, that's crazy. Wait, so did you bounce after that from being sick?
Mm-hmm. So it was a 28-day course, and I think day 18 was like I was so excited about the solo. I'd been talking about it to everybody the whole time, because I was like, finally gonna set all my traps and catch so many squirrels. But my limit was being that sick.
Yeah, that's tough.
When I've told people since, I think maybe somebody else has beat my record, but I think I might have the record for the most weight loss, because I was 163 pounds going in, and I think I was 112 when I got back to my parents.
Oh my God.
So I guess that's 51 pounds, not 55. But
that is crazy. I also did a boss course. I think I was 22, and I apprenticed there afterwards, but I lost 15 pounds in 14 days.
Yeah.
Which, not the same kind of weight loss, but it just goes to show that no matter who you are, like, you move across the land in those conditions with that little of food, the weight's going to pretty soon start dropping off.
Yeah.
It's always funny to hear people being like, oh my gosh, like, can't lose weight. I'm like, I know how. It's like, there's a program that every person that's ever gone there has lost weight. It's not the point, but it happens.
Oh, there's so many ways. Yeah, this past winter in January through into April, did something called the Desert Winter Through Hike, which goes from Tucson to Joshua Tree, across, pretty much just hovering north of the Mexican border. And I don't remember exactly. I'm going to say I was doing like 16, 17 miles a day. And that was the first time I'd ever not lost weight on a trip. And
Really?
I was super stoked about that.
You were just smashing food?
No, I think my partner was eating most of mine and hers. But so I was like very surprised. But I think just like the lower miles and lots of sleep, because, we start in the end of January. So
Yeah, so there's not that much daylight.
Yeah, we're like in bed 12 hours or something. So
That's
that helps
nice.
a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just figuring out the right foods for me helps a lot. And
I really like those winter trips where you get to sleep it's not sleeping. It's like in bed for 12 to 14 hours. Because like 6 o'clock hits, it's pitch black out. You're like cuddling up, and you're not going to get up until 6:30 the next day.
yeah.
And you're just like spending all this time chilling. It's not what I want year round, but in that moment, it's really nice to have those like long, chill nights.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the winter is all about sleeping and catching up on sleep.
Yeah, we've kind of like tried to engineer ourselves out of it.
Yeah.
But like when you're out there in the winter and you see that everybody else is also sleeping, all the other critters are like, no, we're done. It's like, oh, I should probably be just like chilling for the next couple months. Interesting thing on that. We were talking about this last night. Have you heard that like at some point there was a shift, like post-Roman culture, that the first of the year used to be March. And that's why October is Oct, as in the 8th month. And December, Dec, would be the 10th month. but there was basically shifted 2 months. And that's why the beginning of the year now, you still have January and February of pure winter. And really the beginning of the year should be March, where the spring comes out and there's flowers and like revitalization. And it used to be that way. But I'm not exactly sure why it changed. But I was turned on to this a couple months ago, and I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, for me, the new year always starts either in March or May, depending on if I go hike in the desert, it starts in March because that's when things are leafing out.
Yeah.
But if I'm in Montana, things don't leaf out till May. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Montana's a little different.
yeah, my new year starts at a different time. But yeah, it never makes sense to have the new year start in the middle of winter.
Yeah, like the
Sounds
most
very depressing.
brutal time of winter.
Yeah.
It's like, why don't I feel great and want to like tackle life? It's like, oh, it's like -6.
Yeah.
That's why.
So yeah, I hadn't heard that. Yeah, I want to look into it more.
It makes sense too with like the October. Like, of course, that should be the 8th month.
Yeah.
I don't know who decided this, but I have beef with them. So after you kind of gone through the boss course and like taking some wilderness training, I think a lot of us like end up falling in love with the skills, in love with the experience. Obviously, all this stuff is very hard, but it creates like this beautiful experience. You seem to like pursue it maybe head over heels more than most people. What did that transition look like from 17-year-old, relatively normal life into living this like kind of extreme counterculture existence?
Yeah. So I got back from my boss course, and then it was my junior year of high school, and I made it 2.5 days. And I just walked home. And in my memory, I walked home once, but my parents, when they tell the story, they're always like, he walked home 7 days in a row. And that's how they justify letting me just drop out of high school. But yeah, I just started doing my own trips, and I was hugely inspired by Gary Paulson in the Hatchet series.
Yep.
And so I was like, I got to get to Minnesota. So I did an outward bound course in Minnesota, and then spent a lot of time in my mom's side of the family has a farm in Tennessee, so I spent a lot of time out there, just farming and
Being outside.
Yeah, just being outside, doing some construction stuff, chopping wood. And then I just transitioned to the school up in Montana, and that I was just all in. Yeah, I'm like, I would say I'm pretty driven my whole life.
Yeah.
Before switching to becoming all about being an outdoorsman, I wanted to be a professional football player.
Yeah.
So I was just like spent all my time trying to train for that. And that wasn't going that well for me because I was like, when I was 16, I think I just saw my health chart and I was 5'3" and 103 pounds. So I wasn't doing that good on the football field. I was getting injured way too much.
Your time was coming, baby.
But yeah. Sorry, you're gonna have to re-ask.
No, you're good. I was
Okay.
just basically saying, how do you move through going from like you were saying, like a driven life, but more like normal stuff. Like I want to be a football player into now I'm going to live in the woods. Now I'm going to walk these long trails and spend the majority of my life outside. Like what did that transition look like?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think for one, just like doing the boss course is very helpful because I got to know that there is a different life out there. Mm-hmm. And I was like hugely inspired by my instructors. And
who did you have as an instructor?
So Dave Nisha was one of my instructors, and then the lead instructor was Jill Halliday, but I don't know what her name was at that time.
Right.
She wasn't married at the time.
Because there's so many like legends that come from Boss. Like whether you watch like the Alone series or if you're like integrated into the wilderness community, it seems like whether as a student, or a teacher, whatever, everyone has like cross paths with Boss and the survival community at some point or another.
Yeah.
And yeah, Jill, obviously, like the Holidays are massively respected names in the survival community. Dave Nisha was on Alone twice. Yep. Dave is super cool, dude. I've got to hang out with him, and it's just like salt of the earth human being. Yeah. He's a great guy.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that just helps having some role models to let you know that there's a different way you can exist. And I mean, just being around these people, you hear about them like, well, yeah, I just did my 6th 40-day trip of living in a wickiup. And you're like, what? So, And then I found Tom Elpel, who works in Montana, and he has this completely different lifestyle, where he had, also decided not to go to college and just start his own businesses and learn how to do everything himself, like build his own house and build his own publishing company and learn how to write his own books and all this kind of stuff. So that was also very inspiring, just to be like, I don't have to exist within the system the way everybody else does. And once I went up there, I was like learning construction and gardening and how to kill and process animals and just take care of all the basic needs that you need in life directly, which is, even if you don't use them, when you head back to a more normal life, it gives you a whole bunch of confidence. And yeah, I mean, there's just other things that are unique about my personality of just not like being pretty driven towards things, makes it easy for me to ignore other parts of reality.
Yeah.
And then I read books like, let's see if I can remember the name of this book. I can't right now. There's just like a bunch of hitchhiking punks who are like freegans and live with no money by dumpster diving and stuff. So I was just like, oh, I can also just eat roadkill and eat out of dumpsters, and I don't need a traditional job. And
I feel like that was a big piece. What I noticed about the way you guys were living is not only this like passion for the skills, but also passion for like freeganism and just like see what I can do, like how many adventures I can get into, how cool of a life I can live without spending basically any money. And I think it's so different. It's so different than the way everybody else is conditioned that it's like super refreshing to like hear this new perspective.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of cultural conditioning to keep people from living this way.
Yeah.
Just because they want people working, or they just don't want people aimless. I don't know how much they need workers anymore with computers taking over. Yeah.
But I think that's like the major misconception, which is that folks that live an outdoors lifestyle or like a freegan lifestyle are lazy. Right?
Yeah.
That's the disconnect. It's like these people actually aren't lazy. They're just like more countercultural.
Yeah, I definitely, some people will hear that I make $5,000 a year on average and be like, oh, that's a lazy bum.
Yeah.
And I spend it all on gas and car maintenance pretty much.
Yeah.
But
to and from trailheads.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, living this other lifestyle. I remember talking with my friend Barnes, and we're always like simple living. And we're like, there's not much simple about this lifestyle. Like being able to just go to a job and then swipe a card every time you want something.
Yeah.
You can't get much more simple than that. Like to live like a freegan lifestyle or just an outdoor lifestyle. It's like, you need to know when foods are ripe at each time of year. You need to be able to decide when a food is still okay to eat and learn all the different ways to preserve the food. Because, I mean, in a place like Montana, when we're in the fall, we're like processing massive amounts of meat and fruit and roots to last all winter. And it's a lot of work, but it's completely your own schedule.
Yeah.
Like if you want to work today, you can. And if you just want to go on a hike, you can do that.
How does the Green University function? Like what's the like Thomas Elpel's like structure to that school?
Well, I haven't been there for a couple of years, but the way it was done prior to that was basically you could show up at 2 times of the year, spring or fall. Ideally, people would show up in the fall because we're just really busy then, and it gives the people impression they're going to learn a ton. And then it's pretty freeform. Like I like to teach some structured classes. Like I had a very specific 16-day class which like people tan a couple hides and learn how to sew and make moccasins and wallets and how to kill animals and eat the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then one of the things that's very unique about his school is just a lot of schools you go there, you learn how to tan a hide. And then you like, that's just it. This school, you like learn how to tan a hide, and then there's like hundreds of hides that you have access to, and you can tan as many as you want. And same with like, you learn how to kill a sheep at most schools. At this school, you go and you learn how to kill a sheep with a group, but then Tom has like 50 or more sheep that he wants killed every year. So it's like you have the chance individually to kill several sheep and process them fully. So like that's the greatest thing is there's very short time frames where you're getting direct instruction, but then you just keep doing that over and over and over.
Yeah.
To your heart's content, and then you feel like when you leave there, you actually know what you're doing.
Right. It's more of a lifestyle than a course.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of organization around firewood getting, and then there's just a lot of free time too, where if you can't come up with your own things to do, you'll just end up driving to the library and like sitting on your iPhone. So, you have to be somewhat self-motivated.
Sure.
Otherwise, the school doesn't work very well for people because there's only like, I'm going to say 40 days of structured classes over a year-long internship or apprenticeship.
So you've got to kind of have your own projects, own passions that you're pursuing, like alongside the more formal education.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is like, okay, we do a hide tanning class, we do a basketry class, we do some flint napping, and you've just gotten an introduction to it all, and now you pursue it yourself, and whoever the instructor is there, like you learned hide tanning, well, now you're going to go tan your own hides.
Yeah.
And you can go check in with the instructor that lives on the property to be like, hey, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Like, help me out with this little spot. But,
why is my hide so hard and
yeah. Or you're like, for the most part, they're always like, can I still tan this? I'm like, that is really, really rotten. You should definitely compost. And they're like, I'm going to keep tanning it. I'm like, okay, you're going to get an infection.
Wear lots of personal protection.
Yeah. But it is, yeah, it's a very, probably a hard school for a lot of people because some people call it a cult.
Yeah.
We don't really have a cult leader, but we do like worship meat, and there's a lot of, it's just hard because you live outside year round. So a lot of people flake out because you have to just be able to exist in the cold. And
yeah,
we all go to the hot springs to bathe in the winter. And if that's not your jam,
yeah,
or we dumpster dive a lot. And then when you dumpster dive, it's like, yeah, it's free food, but you're only going to town every week or two. And so we have to take all this food and then we have to process it so that it doesn't go bad.
Who's going to Green University? Like what people, because I think folks listening to this sounds like, if you've never been exposed to this stuff, sounds absolutely wild. Who are the individuals that are choosing to live outside in a more old-fashioned sort of scenario?
It kind of runs the gamut. You'll have people there that read some philosophy books and are convinced that the best way to sustainability is to live in the Stone Age or to live as homesteaders. So they're there to try to learn those skills. You have some people that are like ex-military bushcrafter types who just are way into the survival, but probably read some mountain man stories. So they wanted to know how to tan a hide, just like a mountain man would. And yeah, I mean, there's always a few people that just show up because they're just really passionate about learning everything.
Yeah.
But the people that do best are generally people that are younger. Because the older people are used to like handing over their cash and then getting like instruction right away.
Right.
Whereas younger people are generally more down to just like go with the flow and
let's see what happens.
Yeah, like maybe we're not learning any skills this week. We're just collecting firewood, but that's a learning experience for them. Whereas if you're, like 50 years old, and you're like, why am I just working really hard to get firewood for these other people? It's like, I've already been doing this for 10 years or something.
Yeah, it's kind of like the older you get, like the more expectations you have of certain things. I mean, I think we're probably all guilty of that. Like our younger self, like if I went to a course now, I would have a certain amount of expectations because I've been on both sides. I've had certain experiences. 20-year-old me would probably have a lot less of those expectations. Oh yeah. And he'd just be curious, like, what are we going to do? What's going on? What's a credit card? Yeah. Like, just pretty stupid generally. Like my 20-year-old self is like pretty dumb.
Yeah. I mean, when I showed up at the school, I was 18 and it was like the perfect environment for me. All the other students had more expectations and dropped out within the first couple of months. So it was just me the whole year with Tom. And it was great because I just like became part of his family and he's a plant guy. So he'd constantly point out plants and I would be like trying to learn his plant like family
Yeah.
pattern method.
I actually found out about the pattern method before I knew you.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that you and Bartle were at Green University with Tom, but I had studied, like, he has this pattern method where you're recognizing families based on certain patterns, and then, you know, the idea is that if you have these family patterns recognized, you have a good idea of what that species might be and what it could be used for. And
Yeah.
I had read that book and done like the matching cards and everything before I even met you guys and realized it was the same person.
Yeah. My first few days with Tom, he had just printed his kids book version of it called Sean Lamb's Quest,
Yeah,
and we were inventing the card games to play.
I have it downstairs.
Yeah. And we were like, because the cards cover 8 families, and I want to say it's like 50,000 plants out of a potential 300,000 plants in the world. And I was like, oh my God, I just learned 50,000 plants in like 3 hours of playing card games. I was like,
Yeah.
this is amazing.
Pretty exciting.
And like, just for one example, the mustard family has flowers that are composed of 4 petals, like parts in 4 petals, but 6 stamen, 4 tall, 2 short. And there's no other plants in the world that have that. And there's roughly 3,200 mustards, and they're all edible. Though some are like
Gnarly.
pretty medicinal or something. Like if you imagine horseradish or something, it's like,
Right.
you're not going to be eating a bowl of horseradish, but
You could try.
you could. But yeah, it's just like, oh man, you can learn so many edible plants, and then you can go out and you can see this pattern
Yeah.
and just kind of eat at free will and be like, well, I know it's a mustard, so I can eat it,
Right.
and we'll see if I enjoy eating it. And then once you get to just the flower pattern down, and then you start noticing all these other little things to a point where it feels like eventually you're just like, oh, this has an essence of a mustard.
Yeah.
I don't even need to check anything else. And
Right.
you can know it in the middle of winter.
Yeah. Or mint family, square stem, opposite alternating leaves.
Yeah, the opposite leaves and
Yeah.
normally aromatic.
Yeah. Normally aromatic. Yeah. It's a really good method. I think as long as you proceed with some caution, obviously with plants and fungi generally, like I think it's a really good way to like begin your interaction with IDing plants.
Yeah. Yeah, it helps a ton. I mean, it's one of those things learn a little bit. Like I did playing card games, and I'm like, I know 50,000 plants. And then I go out there with Tom 3 or 4 times a week hiking, trying to plug everything into the 8 families I know out of 100 some families in the world. And then I'm like, I have to learn some more families, and I keep
Right.
learning all summer. And I at the end of summer, I felt like I had a pretty good grasp. But there were some families, like I'd always be like, if I can't figure it out, it's probably a buttercup, because buttercups have like a crazy amount of variety. They're very, very ancient plant with like pretty primitive reproduction system. So that
Yeah.
There's always some hiccups.
There's hiccups, and there's a lot of undiscovered plants. Like those 8 families work really well for like North and South America, but if you go deeper in South America, like the Amazon, for example, there's some people who believe we've studied 10% of Amazonian plants.
Oh, definitely.
Which means like we've barely scraped the surface in terms of like categorizing and figuring out medicinal uses and edible uses, and there's still always something to learn. And that's the great thing about botany, is like you can never learn all the plants.
Oh,
It
yeah.
will never happen. It is a lifelong quest, like that you could pursue forever and never get close.
There's so many things in the world that like that.
Yeah.
When people are so interested in trying to find extraterrestrial life and stuff, I'm like, there's so many amazing life forms on this planet that we don't even grant them their intelligence and how they've learned to survive. Like, I just could be so much more fascinated
Like sourdough.
studying something that sourdough. Studying something that exists here than like theorizing about what could exist.
It's a good point. Yeah, unless the aliens have big guns, in which case I do want to know if they exist. If they're chill, then just let them be.
Yeah. Well, it could be a 3-body problem sort of scenario here.
Yeah. So with your studies, like it seems like definitely there's like the skills component, but also not to overshadow is like the athletic side that you've achieved, which is like long distance hiking and running. How did that become kind of ingrained with like the survival skills? Like how did you get into the long trail stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, I obviously wanted to be a professional football player, so I had that athletic
Could still
interest.
happen. I just want to put that out there. It's not over.
Yeah, I'm only gonna be 38 this year.
If you want
Tom
to sign
Brady
Kris,
played till he's 43. So.
yeah, sign Kris. He's available. He's a free agent.
I could probably play as a backup punter.
There you go. Long snapper.
Terrible long snapper. But yeah, so I had the athletic interest, and I just went full in on the skills for a number of years. But made a friend at this outdoor school in Montana named Niall, who told me about ultralight backpacking, and this guy named Andrew Skirka, who had been doing these crazy trips. And I just started reading up about him, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. Because when you do a survival trip, you're often like, you might go out for 30 or 50 miles over a week or 10 days because you have to spend so much time making a shelter or foraging food, or you're just not eating enough. So you're like doing an 8-mile day takes some time.
Yeah.
So, and then once I got into this ultralight backpacking, which took quite a time for me to dial in because I don't know, I just didn't jump in fully. But yeah, you can now I can do 30-mile days and carry all my food and have a much lighter pack than if I was doing a survival trip and see a lot more country. And I really like it because, I just like walking and camping and being out, and it's just very simple and direct. Like, I don't have to think about all the things I could do today. It's just like I have a very specific list of, walk this far, get this much water, start a fire, cook some food, go to sleep, maybe read.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have very many options, which makes, I think, life a lot better mentally. But one of the things I really like about this distance backpacking is I can be interested in an area, and I can cover a few 100 miles, and I can mark down on the map like, oh, there's really good, watercress in this spot, or there's a really good acorn selection over here, or this good route over here to dig. And so I can kind of like make a mental map of all these places I might return to do survival trips, instead of like in the past where I'd just be like, I'm going to go do a survival trip in this mountain range, and then I spend a few days wandering around without food, having not found the best food spots yet.
Yeah, it's true. It's like when you go on a longer trip focused on covering ground, you find the best stay and play areas, which is kind of like counterintuitive. But in order to like find out where that country is, you have to get out there and see it in these really remote spots. Like, you're not going to be able to just like Google a place and really feel its essence until you've like walked through it for several days and actually explored what plants and animals are there.
Yeah. Yeah. And generally I do one of these big hikes, and then I'm like, here's the 3 or 4 trips I need to go do back on this trail.
Yeah.
To hit these spots, just to learn more about them or just spend more time in them. I think it's a great mix, like a great partnership between distance hiking and doing survival skills. Yeah.
What's your favorite long trail that you've done?
Normally it's just whatever one I did most recently. So it makes it really hard to say. I would say, I did the Arizona Trail most recently, but right before that I did this Desert Winter Through hike. And I don't know, I just really like that. It was just almost no elevation gain, which made it super easy. And it was crazy because we started one of the last few days of January, and we got rained on for 2 weeks in southern Arizona, and we were literally walking through inches of just flooded water.
Nice.
For the first few days, and we're like, this is insane. This isn't a desert. This is a tropical forest.
Right.
And then it mellowed out, and it didn't rain the last 40 days or whatever it was. But yeah, I would say that's my favorite because it's my most recent on the Arizona Trail.
Now, let's flip that question on its head, which is, what is like the most tumultuous or like most dangerous situation you've been in on a long trail where you thought you were, too sick or too dehydrated, something like that? What comes to mind?
Well, so I've had a lot of experiences, like a lot of potential dangerous experiences. None that I felt like I was actually at risk of dying. I mean, there's been like some falls, but those aren't really the nature of the trail. That's just like a 30-second experience, and then I'm like, okay, back to get normal. But I guess two that stand out are, one, I think this was 2012 in January. I hitched down to Yuma, Arizona, and I was just going to walk the Gila River to its source.
So like down by the border for folks that aren't familiar with Yuma.
Oh, yeah. So that's like on the California-Mexico border right there. And I didn't have a clear plan. Most of my trips early on, people think this is ridiculous. I just go with a road map. I didn't take, or I'd take one of those DeLorme gazetteers, which is like 4 square miles to an inch. So not a lot of detail. And this one I just started out, and the Gila's like pretty much dammed up and dry the whole distance, except for where there's canals or reservoirs. And so I walked on a canal for the first couple days, and then I got to the riverbed, and actually I'd seen a sign for an airplane landing strip. So when I got to the riverbed, I thought I was at the airplane landing strip. So I just like walked through it, and then like pushed through a bunch of willows for a while, and then popped back out on the riverbed. And I was like, oh, this is the river, and there's not a drop of water. And I think that day I probably walked 20 some miles or something without water. And then I found this hole, which a bunch of javelinas had dug in the riverbed. And it was about like 12 feet deep.
Like one of those mud pits?
No, it was just like dry sand.
Okay.
And just there's this huge hole, and I had to like crawl all the way in under the sand.
Weird.
And I'd like read Cody London's survival books. So I had this like long fish like water tube.
Yeah, the like siphoning device.
So I like spun it out to this very shallow puddle that was like not much bigger than the palm of your hand, and like I don't know, like a half-inch deep.
So the javelina had basically found groundwater, dug down in there, and you just kind of followed in their tracks.
Yeah, so I crawled down there, but like I have 4 or 5 feet of just sand above my head, so I'm like, if this collapses, this is gonna be hilarious. Forever flying
feet up.
I'm just like this idiot buried his head in the sand. But I drank some water, and for some reason I was like, oh, I'll find more of these. And then I walked the rest of the day, or the rest of the next day, without finding water. And then I ended up hitting a road and getting stopped by Border Patrol and asked for water from them, and they said no way.
Really?
Yeah. But they did check my ID.
Thank God.
Yeah. So I'm in the clear. And then there was a photovoltaic solar plant that gave me some water, and I like walked out a little bit, camped for the night, and I had on my map the next town. So I like drank all my water the next morning and started walking, and the next town was actually a locale on the map, which was just like a electronic transformer for like a power station kind of thing.
Great.
No water.
Great.
And so that day I ended up having to do 40 miles, and I ran into some hunters that gave me a pint of water, and then I found a mud pit, and I squeezed a bunch of mud through my sock.
There you go.
I think I got about a quart of slurry. But otherwise it was like low 80s degrees temperatures, and I did my first 40-mile day on probably under a half gallon of water.
Jesus.
And that was probably the weirdest one, because what ended up happening was like 28 miles in, I got to the reservoir, but I was at the foot of the reservoir. And there was an Army Corps of Engineer station there, but I couldn't get in because it's all razor wired, so I couldn't get the water, and the dam was like keeping me from the water. And to get to the top, I'd had to backtrack, I think it was 15 or more miles, and instead I looked at the map and saw a spring out in the wilderness called Woosley Spring, and I just started trekking there in the night. And at this point in time, I didn't carry a flashlight.
Yeah.
So it was like an old 4-wheel drive road, so it was pretty simple directions. And it was actually cool because this is the first time I've seen this. There are a lot of these in Arizona, but it's just like a big concrete pad that collects rainwater and funnels it into a trough for wildlife.
Oh, nice.
So I mean, when I got there, I just pretty much just laid down and slept by.
Just absolutely gorged yourself with water.
I drank a lot of water, and then I couldn't move the next day. I hadn't walked that much ever, so I was like super stiff, and I just camped in the wash and
Drink water.
And made a big pot of quinoa and was like, read my book.
There you go.
And then started hiking the next day and
Made it out.
well, I made it to Phoenix with a few more struggles, and I'm like, I'm out, and I hopped on a Greyhound bus
There you go.
and went back home.
I think a long starvation and dehydration moment like that, probably a good idea to just bounce out,
Yeah.
go recalibrate, maybe come back another time with a different plan.
Yeah. My other one that I felt like maybe is the most sketchy. I mean, I have some more, but was in Hell's Canyon in Oregon. I'd like wanted to go out there to dig these roots, these Lomatian Coos roots. And I talked to some friends that were local to the area, and they were kind of telling me that it's not the ideal time to go out. This was in May, that I should wait some, but I was like, that's when I want to go out. And I kind of bent their wisdom to fit my model. And I was like, because Hell's Canyon is like from top to bottom. The bottom might be like 1,000 feet, and the top might be like 7,000 or 8,000 feet.
It's like 6,000 or 7,000 feet of change.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, so I'll just find the right zone where they're actually flowering,
Yeah.
and I can go dig them.
And this is what time of year?
I'm pretty sure it was in May.
May.
Not positive about that.
So they're saying this is a little early.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so then this was gonna be an all wild food walk. I had my dog and my friend Bartle, partner at the time, and so we took a week of wild foods with us. Just because we were like, we'll get in there and then we'll start digging roots and we'll start trapping and all these things. Well, we got in there, and when we finally got to the first Lomatian Coos, there was like 5 feet of snow on top of them, except for in this like one spot where somebody had parked their car for a while. Snow machine. And I was like, oh crap. Like the roots only grow on the top. So we ate a lot of different Lomatians, like macrocarpums and Ganbii and stuff like that. But they're not as tasty, and just they're a little harder to dig.
Yeah.
They weren't ones that historically were used by the locals there.
Yeah. It's probably not that great.
Yeah, I mean they were used intermittently, but they weren't harvested in mass. So on that trip, like we ate miner's lettuce, just pounds and pounds of miner's lettuce.
Widely available, at least.
Yeah, and I think it was day 18. I'm not positive. We ran into some bear hunters, and they hadn't shot a bear yet, but they had a bunch of modern food. And I also broke into a Forest Service cabin and stole a bunch of like old Pop-Tarts that were like 5 years expired and trail mix bars and stuff. And so the other thing to go with this is that I hadn't eaten sugar for a year and a half, and I hadn't eaten grains for maybe 6 months. I know, like wild rice was the thing we brought. So this was my first reintroduction of grains. So I'd been like kind of on this crazy diet. And then I killed that entire fast with eating old Pop-Tarts and trail mix bars, and then these guys had just brought a bunch of like M&Ms and Jolly Ranchers and stuff like that, and I just pounded sugar. And the next morning my face was like I got stung by a wasp. I couldn't open my eyes. Like I had this severe allergic reaction to sugar, and definitely was like good die right there from sugar overdose. And then they got a bear. We got some bear meat from them,
some
which
fresh
was
bear
super
meat.
nice. Yeah. And then I can't remember the name of it, but we're hiking north up the river, and then we were going to take a different route and over, like we were following the river, the Snake River, paralleling it, and then we were going to take a different route back to where my car was parked at our friend Colin's house, and we went through a place called Deep Creek Canyon, and this one you walked 4 steps and you'd have 25 ticks on you.
Wow.
And so we just kept brushing them off. We're
That early too, huh?
yeah.
Weird.
This is still before my birthday, which is the middle of May.
Yeah.
Because I had my birthday right after.
Because usually you'd expect them like a little bit later in the spring, early summer to like really turn on.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. I mean, this there's so much
I
variance
guess
in the
you're moving
topography.
and you're
Yeah.
so much in elevation.
But that was the scariest because we were like brushing all the ticks off ourselves. But by the time we got to camp that night, my dog had over 3,000 ticks on him.
Sure.
And we got to our turnaround spot where we'd left a cache of more wild food. And he was like, his hips failed, and then all his organs got distended and dropped because the ticks have some kind of chemical that causes failure
Wow.
in organs and hips.
Huh.
Mostly affects deer. So we had to like abandon the trip to go get him to a vet, and he recovered well enough.
Let's go.
Lived
He
a few
lived?
more years.
There you go.
But that was the closest brush with death.
You were going to really bum me out if you said the dog died there.
Not on that trip. Yeah.
He lived to see another day.
Yeah, I like got a hotel. I don't know if that was my first time ever getting a hotel on a trip, but I got a hotel so that he could recover because he couldn't walk. And they saw my dog as I was like carrying him around. They're like, "What's wrong with him?" They're like, "Oh, he just hurt his leg." And I didn't want to tell them that, yeah, he's about to drop like 3,000 ticks in your hotel room. It was going to be madness.
Oh, no.
But yeah, those are the closest brush with death, I guess.
That's insane. Like, I think for most folks listening to this to think that you would put yourself in that situation, like go out intentionally, try to live that close to the land using just wild foods, like it just sounds like an alien. Like it sounds like something not even fathomable to like most modern people.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely people out there that do it much more successfully than I have, but not many people try it.
Yeah.
And I'm not 100% sure why. I think, just most people have different goals based on what they're fed in youth.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up watching The Gods Must Be Crazy, so I was obsessed with living like a bushman.
Yeah.
Doing friction fire and stuff like that.
Yeah, those are some of my earliest memories too. It's just like building shelters,
Yeah.
spearfishing, like being barefoot. And then, things in life happen. They take you away from those moments. Life gives you these other goals, and like most of them end up being like superfluous, non-important things. And then you realize like, oh no, like being close to the land, living outside, moving your body, eating whole foods. These are all like the things that we are meant to be doing.
Yeah. I definitely feel more fulfilled the less I engage with most modern desires.
I saw that you got a phone. That's exciting.
Oh yeah.
Big step.
Yeah, I got a smartphone about 2 years ago.
Oh, okay. Maybe I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I must have missed that.
Yeah, I had a flip phone for a long time.
That's what I remembered was like this like thing that I would get a text back like once every 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah, it was I didn't really want to get the smartphone, but I started getting kind of pushed into it, like doing the Arizona Trail. So I've done it twice. The first time I did it, I just bought maps and did map and compass on it. Well, they pretty much stopped updating the maps and compass because everybody just uses Gut Hook or Far Out or one of the other, Gaia or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'd often get in very tricky situations where the trail had been rerouted from the maps that the Arizona Trail Association sold me, and they didn't give me the updated trail. So I'd just be like, all right, I'm going to either do the old trail or have to figure this out. Or the springs would be listed in the wrong areas and stuff. And I never had any terrible things, but I mean, it can be pretty hot out there. It's in the 90s and you're at the spot on the map where the spring is and it's not there.
There's no spring. And you're like kind of an anti-treatment guy too. So like the spring becomes even like cleaner water becomes even more important to you because you're not using, more modern filtering devices.
Yeah. I'll drink almost any water, but I definitely I carry some Aquamira tabs if I have to drink out of cow shit.
Yeah.
But sometimes I drink out of cow shit without, like this is the last time I did the Arizona Trail. I think I brought 10 tabs with me, and I think they each treated a quart or a half gallon, and I think I used 4 or 5 over the course of a month. And maybe I should have used them a couple other times, but it didn't matter.
So you think your stomach's just like built up resiliency from years and years of drinking wild water?
I think so. So in 2009, I got a pretty bad case of Giardia. And I chose not to take antibiotics for it. And I just did a lot of fasting with a lot of tea and honey and taking crazy amount of herbs for trying to kill it
Yeah.
naturally, or try to like come back into balance with it. And that one was like, I think it ended with like a 10-day fast where I just kind of like cut out anything but water.
Yeah.
And then I stopped having diarrhea. It was bad. Like I was going like 50 times a day.
Yeah.
I stopped having diarrhea, so I finally started reintegrating food. And then I remember it was my birthday that year. So I think that must have been like my 22nd birthday. And I had like solid shit, and I like ran into the camp, and I'm like, victory! Let's go! So I think for me, and other people have maybe similar experiences of just like, if you don't kill the thing, that you can maybe find
some balance.
Yeah, your body can learn to communicate with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the science says that if you get Giardia once, you're more likely to get it again.
Yeah.
And I've only heard one person that has supposedly had it multiple times.
I've had it once for sure, positive test. The first time I had something that was extremely violent. It was on a 28-day walk, and maybe for a week it was super violent, like 30 times a day, but extreme appetite. Like I was almost as if I was absorbing nothing. So I was just going through my rations, and I only had a little bit of food. I mean, just like instantly going through 3 days worth of food in 2 hours because I was starving, and it was just going right through me. But I ended up leaving like the bush like a week later and got a stool test, and it had whatever it was had like kind of cleared up. And then this year I got Giardia, and it was like on the stool test, and I was sick for 3.5-ish months just taking herbs and like trying to fix it naturally and holistically. And actually the first day I felt better is when you and I ran the Collegiate West. Like that 80-mile trip was the first time I had like done anything. I was like bedridden up until that point pretty much, from what I later found out was Giardia. I knew it was something, but I didn't want to go to the doctor. And then I did the 80-mile trip with you and ran Leadville right after that, and then almost died after Leadville. And that was when they were like, you're going to the hospital. I was like, all right. And then when I went to the hospital, they were like, you have Giardia along with internal bleeding. But
yeah. How much of that is from the run?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I was pretty fucked up in all types of ways. So,
yeah.
But I think you're right. Like the point remains true that as far as we can tell, most of us have some existence of E. coli, salmonella, Giardia, like some existence of these bacteria in our gut biome. And it's just like a matter of like, how do you decide to deal with it? Is it by just like eradicating everything? Or is it from like trying to like have like some symbiosis for some of the stuff? What is interesting is that the antibiotics are not going to kill everything. Yeah. And that's what I had to learn was like the flagell, or like the antibiotics directed towards Giardia, they're not going to destroy your entire gut biome. And that was like, once I read that, I was like, fine, I'll take it. Because I was like very resistant to the idea of like destroying what I had built up.
Yeah.
It's like a sandcastle in here. Like I spent time on this thing and then I'm just going to like have a wave completely wash it out. Like that doesn't seem appropriate, but I guess it doesn't necessarily work like that. It's a little more complicated.
Yeah, I mean, from reading studies of hunter-gatherers like the Hadza, you're like 3 days living with the Hadza can completely. So I think you can bounce back pretty quick, and antibiotics definitely are the thing to do at times.
Yeah.
But my first go-to is always to like imagine my body just like the earth. Like the earth is this interacting dynamic of all these plants and animals that kind of find a symbiosis. Mm-hmm. And I try to let my body find that same kind of balance if I can. But you know, there's some things you just can't.
What did you?
No matter how healthy you are, you're not going to survive smallpox.
Right. I know when I had Giardia, like I've tried so many different herbs now. Like I think the first time I had it, I was doing more like Oregon grape and like psyllium husk. The second time it was more like marshmallow root, salix, trying to think, slippery elm. Yeah, I've tried a lot of different stuff. I don't know. Is there any natural roots or tinctures that you've tried that have been like the go-to for stomach issues?
I mean, it depends on where I'm at. Like if I'm in the Sonoran Desert area, chaparral is the thing to go to for me. Though there's like a plant called crucifix thorn, which people swear by for giardia. That's down there, and it grows in the Mojave Desert as well.
Okay, so pretty much California, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
I have never tried that.
And do you know the plant?
No.
Okay. I mean, it's a crazy plant. So if you look at it, it kind of looks like a ephedra, like Mormon tea.
Yep.
Because it's just like a green stalk, but instead it branches to make it look like a crucifix, and then it's like thorny on the end.
Okay.
And it's much more hardy.
Gotcha.
It's a rough explanation. And it's like a big bush. Like it can be like 8 or 9 feet tall and like take up a lot of volume.
Interesting. So I wonder if this is similar to the one that they have in Dubai and the Middle East, because they have this plant that looks very similar to Mormon tea, but it's much larger and bigger in volume. But I don't think it formed a crucifix, but I bet they're the same plant family.
Yeah.
Or at least like look similar, because that's what I'm imagining.
Surprised. I feel like there's been a lot of introduction to deserts around the world to try to get new plants.
Yeah.
To
get anything to live there.
Yeah, essentially. So it could be true.
Yeah, I read something the other day, something to the effect of that the Sahara, I believe it is, grows by like 60 miles per year.
Oh, yeah.
It's like basically just like, I think it's moving south, but like it just like continues to expand, which I had never even thought about that being a thing, that this thing's just like swelling bigger and bigger. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's different theories to the formation of the Sahara, but some people think it's just kind of a natural thing, but there's a lot of evidence to point that it's a man-made desert from poor grazing and farming practices. Because I think in the time of Alexander the Great, a lot of the Sahara was under wheat cultivation. Obviously not the majority of it's so huge, but the portion near his area. So, yeah, I mean, once you start something in the wrong direction, inertia can keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, they say it used to look like more like the Amazon, right? Like it used to be a rainforest or like subtropical rainforest.
Yeah.
And I don't know what time period, but to imagine the Sahara Desert looking like that now is pretty crazy. Like if you go over there, it's nothing but dust. It's like, we're going back to Dubai this year, and it is the craziest thing. You're like, it's this overwhelming city. Like it looks like Las Vegas, and it's just built on a pile of sand. Like it's literally these crazy cantilevered buildings, and they're just on sand. They have to dig these giant rods like hundreds of feet down into the ground.
Oh, the sand's that deep?
Yeah,
crazy.
Like it's just like, well, they have to get under the sand, right?
Yeah.
So at some point you get into like bedrock or like something more foundational, and they have these giant bars that like go down through the earth so that they can create the giant buildings like Burj Khalifa, which is like the biggest building in the world. It's like 3 Empire State Buildings.
Yeah.
It's absolutely enormous.
It's crazy. Yeah, I grew up in Okinawa, Japan, and there, like, I want to say it's like an island that's maybe 400 square miles or something.
Okay.
And I did the math once, and like if all the people laid down, it would cover the entire island.
Whoa.
It's like every person has something like a 2x6 space or something like that.
Whoa, it's like that densely populated. Wow.
So they would make these giant like jacks, like the ones where you play with a bouncy ball, but they would be like maybe 20-ish feet in diameter. So just the 4-prong jack, and then they just dump them they make them out of concrete, and then just dump them into the ocean.
Yeah.
And then push earth on them.
Yep.
And then just build right on top of it. I'm always like, I wonder how this is gonna last long term.
There was definitely like a time when on the planet that was thought to be cool, because San Francisco's like that, I think, too.
Okay.
It's just like basically they just pushed the garbage out and like patted it down and put like some rebar, in theory, like some big hard metal things in the mixture of shit, and then just like built over top of it. And they're like, that'll work. That'll give us more real estate to work with.
Yeah. Well, yeah, people have been building with trash for a long time.
Yeah. So maybe that's the next frontier for you, just going and dumpster diving like the coast of Okinawa, Japan.
Yeah.
There's probably some good stuff in there.
I always thought it'd be fun and to imagine a future when we've used up the easy resources, and so that our main cities like condense around our past dumps, and people just mine our landfills.
Interesting.
Sure. I don't know if it'll happen, but like there's so much good stuff in there.
Yeah, there probably is. Most people don't see it.
Probably super toxic too. But
What I think that is a topic that most people don't think about. What's the idea behind dumpster diving? Like, why is it attractive to folks?
well, from a numbers perspective, I mean, you can hear different numbers, but they generally, it's something close to 40 to 50% of all food in the U.S. gets wasted before somebody ever gets a chance to eat it. And I couldn't tell you the specifics, but like half of that is probably agricultural. So it's like wasted on the farm. And so you can recover that by gleaning, which is an ancient practice. And it's like even in the Bible and the Torah and stuff. So like in Montana, glean by going to the potato fields, and they reject a majority of their potatoes because they're too small, or they just get missed by the cultivator, or they get rejected because they got nicked, or they have too weird of a shape to sell. And so you can just go through their rows once they're done harvesting and like pick up all these potatoes and get enough potatoes for the year.
Wow.
Fill up your pickup bin. And there's a lot of things like that.
Is that a situation where you're like talking to the farmer, you're like, hey, can I just go walk your land real quick
Yeah.
and be my own combine?
Yeah. And some people are not into it that have a very work hard method like ideology.
Yeah.
They're like, get a job.
Right.
But most people are pretty down because they're just like, that stuff's just going to rot.
Sure.
You can do this with, like, no matter where you're at, there's some food that's being cultivated. And if you just ask, like the winter walk I did, the desert winter through hike, we were walking through some melon fields. There's just like discarded melons everywhere.
Yeah. It's a big thing in like the long trail community. It's just like everyone realizes there's gonna be trail food that like doesn't get eaten, and so like there's just hiker boxes everywhere. It's like, instead of throwing this away, I'm just gonna leave it here because I know someone else is gonna walk through and need calories.
Yeah. That is, on any established trail that has a decent number of people, you could live off a hiker box. You could hike the Appalachian Trail or Pacific Crest Trail and never buy a single bit of food because you could just dumpster and hiker box your way.
Yeah. Has anyone done that?
I don't know.
What's your next challenge?
That was when I was like 20. I was like, I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail and not buy any food. Now I don't think I'd do it because I'm like more picky about the foods I will eat.
Yeah. Just like from a health perspective, you mean?
From a health perspective,
Yeah, you're not going to be smashing Pop-Tarts every day for 2 months.
No. I would be. And through hikers have like the worst diet in the world. Like most of them are just like eating jelly beans.
Processed sugar.
Yeah. And every time I'm like, I eat healthy. Like on trail, I eat more sugar than normal.
Sure.
But I like probably eat like 20 grams or less of processed sugar a day, which is very low for through hikers.
Yeah.
And they're like, everybody just stares at me and they're like, then why do you hike? Like the whole point is just to eat bad because we know we're burning off the calories. And I'm like, well, I like my teeth and I like my organs and
I don't want to die.
Yeah, I want to take care of my body as much as possible.
But that's the misconception of this whole thing, is that like through hikers, freegans, people that are in the skills community are like all just lazy hippies that don't care about anything, right? It's like this massive misconception. It's like it would actually be incredibly hard to live this way if you were lazy.
Yeah, you have to work hard to do any of these things, but more than these people being lazy, they're just society dropouts.
Yeah.
They either haven't found how they want to exist in the modern culture, or they just know they never want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to figure out what feels best for them.
Don't we all struggle with that though, to some degree?
Some people are just super motivated. They're just on one track. They're just like, I'm going to go to college and get the job. And
yeah,
this is what I'm doing the rest of my life.
But I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, I feel like everyone, even the 9-to-5er who's driving down the road, he passes this forest and he looks. And in my mind, he looks into there and he goes, man, I feel like I'm supposed to be in there. Maybe he doesn't, but I feel like he does.
It could be. I know my dad is one of the people that like, he went to the Air Force Academy as a kid, became a pilot, a fighter pilot, and just like never regretted any decision. He probably drove past a forest and being like, I think that would make a really good golf course. But yeah. So he's one of the people that just loved his work his entire life.
That's good. Different strokes for different folks.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. But
if there's a message that you have for folks that are interested, for 20-year-old Kris listening to this, what's the message? What kind of encouragement would you give to someone trying to live like a atypical lifestyle?
Oh man, I mean, there's so many things that I could say, but I just say like, you don't have to do what all your people you grew up around, all your teachers and parents and your friends' parents and your role models on TV are going to be telling you that you have to do a certain thing, and you don't have to. There's other voices out there, and if you just go out and do some trips, you just do a backpacking trip, and you'll run into some of these people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if you live in the East and you like hop on the Appalachian Trail for 10 days, you can do that with almost no skills, and you'll instantly meet somebody that'll be like, hey, you should come to here. And if you're 20, you can just kind of flow with that.
Yeah.
And be like, pop to that person's place, and then you'll meet more people. And then, 3 years later, you'll have like been like, hey, I don't have any debt from college.
It's amazing.
And you can still go to college if you wanted to, but you'd be like settled into your new life.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's good advice, but
I think it is. The advice is to go get out there and meet like-minded people. Like, if you don't feel like you fit into society the way it's currently being pitched to you, see what else you can find. There's other folks out there doing cool shit.
Oh, there's endless amounts of people doing cool stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're like young enough and you're just popping around, you'll go spend some time on a farm and be like, maybe that's your jam, or maybe you're like, I want a little something different than this homesteading life, but you'll meet the people there that'll give you the opportunity for the next, and you can just bounce around learning different lifestyles until you find one that really sings to you.
I think the first time me and you met was at a trailhead, and I brought you guys 10 pounds of burger meat because you were finishing or like hitting like a halfway, and I was about to join you guys on a walk. And that was the first time we met, was like sitting on the ground, dirty as shit in a parking lot, just like over a stove, cooking a bunch of hamburger meat.
Yeah.
It's like, people are out there doing those kinds of things. If that's what's interesting to you, you just got to figure out how to cross paths with those types of folks.
Yeah. And now with the internet and Instagram, most people you just send a message out to somebody.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised. Like my friend Tom, every time we do a walkabout, there'd always be like 2 or 3 random people that just send him an email, and we're like, hey, I live in this area and want to do a trip with you. And then like the next time we did a trip in that area, we would just send them an email back and be like, hey, I'm about to do a trip if you want to come.
Cool.
And we just, at Trailhead, just meet some random person.
There you go.
Be like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of self-selects, right? People that are like down to go out and suffer and live like very close to the land usually are going to have like some characteristics that are in common with you.
Yeah.
So excellent, man. Well, I'm sure we could talk for like 10 hours, but thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing the wisdom and the stories. And anything else you want to say before we pop off?
No, this has been great. This is my first podcast.
Really?
The cherries popped.
first podcast. Hopefully not the last. Oh, wait, and I forgot to show everyone. Speaking of popping cherries, this is a gift that Mr. Kris Reed brought for me, which is a nut sack. It literally is a ball sack with nuts inside of it. So, look at that craftsmanship. Beautiful. Well, thanks for coming on, and